I never imagined the first time my phone would ring after my son's funeral, it would be his teacher. And I definitely wasn't prepared for what she said. "Mrs. Carter, you need to come to the school. Now. There's someone here waiting for you." Her voice trembled. Not politely, not gently. It trembled like she'd seen something she didn't know how to process. I remember gripping the phone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely keep it at my ear. "What do you mean, someone's waiting for me?" I whispered. "My son just, I know," she cut in softly, "but you need to come." And then she said a name I hadn't expected to hear, a name that didn't make sense. And everything around me went quiet, not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that screams. Just 2 hours earlier, I'd been standing beside a lowered casket in a cold Denver cemetery, staring at the name Ethan Carter carved on a polished plaque, still refusing to believe it was real. My 16-year-old son. Gone. People kept touching my shoulders, saying things like "Hez in a better place" or "You're so strong, Melissa." But they didn't know I wasn't strong. And I couldn't feel anything except this crushing, suffocating ache like grief was tightening a rope around my heart, pulling a little harder every minute. When the funeral ended, everyone left in waves. Some hugged me. Some whispered condolences. Most left quickly, the way people do when tragedy makes them uncomfortable. I stayed behind. The world felt wrong, twisted, empty. The sky looked too blue for a day like this. The breeze felt too warm. Life kept moving like nothing happened, and that made me furious. By the time I got home, my living room was filled with half-wilted flowers and untouched casseroles. I kicked off my shoes, wrapped myself in Ethan's old gray hoodie, it still smelled like his cologne, and sat on the floor. And then my phone rang. I remember staring at it for a long time, numb, before finally answering. "That's when his teacher, Miss Bradley, said the words that made my stomach drop. "There's someone here waiting for you. Someone who says he needs to talk to you about Ethan." "Who?" I asked. She hesitated. A heartbeat. 2. Then she said it, and I froze. Because the person waiting at the school was the one person Ethan feared the most. The one person who should have had nothing to do with him. The one person who, just weeks before he died, Ethan begged me never to let back into our lives. Yet somehow, there he was, waiting for me. I didn't think. I just drove. I nearly blew past 3 stop signs. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Every beat of my heart pounded in my ears, louder and louder as I got closer to Westbridge High. The parking lot was empty. Classes had ended hours earlier. Only Miss Bradley's car sat near the entrance, and beside it, I couldn't breathe. He stood there like he owned the place, hands in his pockets, eyes cold, calculating. I hadn't seen him in years. Not since the court order. Not since I swore I'd never get anywhere near Ethan again. So why now? Why here? 2 hours after my son's funeral. And how did he even know? I stepped out of the car slowly, my legs trembling. "Melissa," he said, like we were old friends. Like he hadn't nearly destroyed my life once already. I swallowed hard, the back of my throat burning. "What are you doing here?" He tilted his head, smiled. A slow, unsettling smile that made my skin crawl. "I heard about Ethan," he said. "Thought you might want answers." Answers. My stomach twisted. He shouldn't have known anything. He shouldn't have cared. But he stood there, calm and confident, as if he held something over me, as if I'd been waiting for this moment. Miss Bradley stepped out of the doorway then, her face pale and tight. She looked scared, really scared. "Mrs. Carter," her voice wavered. "He said he has information about what happened to Ethan." My heart stuttered. Information? About what happened? Everyone had told me it was an accident, a tragic, sudden accident. But in that moment, for the very first time, I felt doubt creep in. Cold, sharp, dangerous. "What information?" I asked. He took a slow step closer. "Not here," he murmured. "Let's go inside." "No." My voice broke, but I stayed firm. "I'm not going anywhere with you." He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked satisfied. Then I'll say it out here. A long, heavy silence hung between us, the kind that turns your heartbeat into thunder in your own ears. Miss Bradley shifted nervously, glancing between us. And then he said it. The sentence that cracked my world wide open. Ethan wasn't alone the night he died. And the person who was with him was someone you trust. Someone who's been lying to you. My breath hitched. My knees nearly buckled. What are you talking about? My voice came out as a whisper. He watched me carefully, almost tenderly. And that scared me more than anything. You want to know the truth? He asked softly. Then you should know who your son really reached out to before he died. The last person he tried to call. No, don't. My voice trembled, but it was too late. He said the name. And when he did, it felt like someone punched the air out of my lungs. Because the last person my son contacted, the last person who saw him alive, was the one person I never would have suspected. The person waiting inside the school wasn't him. The person waiting was the one who destroyed me. And they were just steps away. When people talk about grief, they never mention the strange, blurry hours afterward when time feels like it's folding in on itself. When you walk through places you know too well, but everything looks slightly tilted, slightly wrong. That was me, sitting in my car outside Westbridge High, staring at the man I never wanted to see again, while everything inside me begged to turn back. But to understand why his presence rattled me that deeply, you need to know who he is, and who I used to be. I grew up in Pueblo, Colorado, a town where the mountains look close enough to touch, and everyone knows everything about everyone. My childhood was loud and chaotic. My dad worked 3 jobs. My mom battled her own storms. I learned early how to survive, how to stay small, how to disappear when I needed to. When I had Ethan at 22, I swore I'd give him a different life, a safe life. I moved us to Denver. I got certified as a medical billing specialist and worked from home so I could be around for him. Every birthday, every exam week, every late-night fever I was there. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I tried so hard. My greatest fear was that Ethan would inherit my loneliness. So I overcompensated. That's how he came into the picture. Caleb wasn't Ethan's father. He was the man I almost built a life with. We met at a tech conference when Ethan was 10. Caleb was sharp, attractive, and charming in a way that made you feel chosen just by standing next to him. He had this bright, ambitious energy that pulled people in and a darker side he hid until he didn't feel like hiding it anymore. At first, he made me feel seen. Then he made me feel small. Then he made me feel scared. The jealousy, the quiet manipulation, the slow erosion of my confidence. He never laid a hand on Ethan, but he was unpredictable around him. Too strict, too harsh, too controlling. It was like he saw Ethan as competition, another person pulling my attention away. The final straw came when Ethan was 13. Something happened, something that made Ethan lock himself in his room for hours. He begged me, with tears in his eyes, never to let Caleb back into our house. I believed him. I left Caleb. I got a court order. And for years, he stayed gone. At least, I thought he had. Seeing him again outside the school felt like running into a nightmare he'd carefully packed away. To everyone else, Ethan was the kind of kid people described as solid, quiet but kind, a good student. He played basketball, though not well enough to make varsity. He loved astronomy. He loved old vinyl records. He loved teaching me TikTok dances, even though I looked ridiculous doing them. But underneath that sweetness, he carried shadows he never fully explained. In the months before he died, he seemed off. Not rebellious. Not reckless. Just distant. He lost weight. He spent more time alone. He stared at his phone like it held secrets he couldn't decide whether to share. I asked him again and again if something was wrong. He always smiled and shook his head. "I'm fine, Mom. Really." Those were his last words to me the night before the accident. I replay them constantly now, longing for the version of the world where he didn't have to pretend he was fine. Emily Bradley was Ethan's English teacher, but she treated him like more than just another student. Shed always said Ethan reminded her of her younger brother, gentle soul, smart thinker, someone who felt more than he admitted. During parent-teacher conferences, she told me Ethan was one of the only students who asked if she was okay. He noticed things. He cared deeply. After the funeral, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering how she wished Shed done more. I didn't know what she meant then. I do now. She knew something. Something she was afraid to say in front of Caleb. Something that connected to the name he dropped like a bomb only moments earlier. Denver is beautiful in ways that make you forget your problems for a few minutes. The mountains in the distance, the crisp air, the coffee shops on every corner, the steady rhythm of people who seem to always be in a hurry. But when tragedy hits, the beauty becomes this strange, painful contrast. Ethan's school, Westbridge High, sat at the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. Brick walls, blue doors, a tall flagpole that clinked softly in the wind. It'd been there dozens of times for parent meetings, awards nights, basketball games, but it felt different now, like the whole building was holding its breath, and everyone inside knew something I didn't. Before the funeral, before the shock, before the aching stillness of the cemetery, I had convinced myself Ethan died in a tragic accident. A late-night walk, a fall near the ravine trail, a misstep in the dark. The police said there was no foul play, no sign of anyone else there. I believed them. I needed to believe them. But then Miss Bradley called. Then Caleb appeared. Then he said Ethan wasn't alone, and suddenly, the version of events I'd clung to cracked. The name Caleb said, the name that made my blood run cold, belonged to someone I trusted completely, someone I leaned on, someone who had been part of Ethan's life for years. This person wasn't family, but they were close enough to feel like it. Someone who stepped in when I was overwhelmed. Someone who helped Ethan with school, with rides, with advice. Someone who told me they loved Ethan like their own. So why? Why had Ethan tried to call them in the final moments of his life? Why hadn't they come forward? Why hadn't they said anything at the funeral? Why hadn't they said anything to me? Looking back, I realize I'd been living half awake. I missed the hints. The tension in Ethan's shoulders, the change in his tone when this person's name came up. The days he avoided certain questions. Grief makes you see everything you overlooked, every subtle warning, every moment you chalked up to stress or teenage moods, every sign that someone you trusted was not who you thought they were. So there I was, standing in the parking lot, staring at Caleb, feeling like the ground beneath me was shifting. And behind the school doors, inside the quiet hallway, was the person Ethan reached out to. The person who waited for me. The person who changed everything. The person who destroyed me. But at that moment, before the truth unraveled, before the confrontation, before the betrayal, I was just a grieving mother looking for the missing pieces of her son. And I had no idea the darkest piece was about to surface. The school hallway was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the eerie kind, where every sound echoes like it doesn't belong. My footsteps felt loud. The click of the clock on the wall felt loud. My breathing felt loud. Miss Bradley walked beside me, twisting her hands the way people do when they want to say something but can't find the courage. Caleb followed behind us, slow and steady, like he wanted me to feel the weight of every step he took. He always walked that way, deliberate, controlled, like he was measuring how much fear or pressure he wanted to apply. We stopped outside the empty counseling room. Before we go in, Miss Bradley whispered, "Please, just try to keep an open mind." Something inside me tightened. My voice came out barely above a breath. "Why? Who's in there?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped back and let Caleb answer for her. "The person who saw Ethan the night he died," he said, thumbs hooked casually in his pockets. "The person he trusted. The person you trusted. He was enjoying this too much. He was always like that, feeding off chaos, feeding off control." I swallowed hard. Then I pushed open the door. Inside the counseling room. At first, I didn't see anyone. Then a chair scraped slightly to the left, and a familiar voice said quietly, "Melissa, I didn't know how to tell you." My heart stopped. Sitting at the round table, head down, hands clasped tightly, was Claire Bennett, my best friend, my neighbor of 6 years. The woman who had picked Ethan up from school more times than I could count. The woman who helped us rebuild our lives after Caleb. The woman who held me the night Ethan was born because my own mother couldn't make it in time. Claire. She lifted her face slowly, and her eyes were swollen and red like she'd been crying for hours. "Claire?" I whispered. What are you doing here?" Her chin trembled. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Before she could get a word out, Caleb leaned a shoulder against the doorframe. "Why don't you tell her the truth?" he said. "Go on. You've been hiding it long enough." "Don't," Claire snapped, her voice cracking. "Don't push me. Not right now." She sounded broken, shaken, but also terrified in a way I'd never seen from her. "Claire," I said slowly, my throat tight, "were you with my son the night he—" Her eyes squeezed shut. Tears slid down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "I was the last person who saw him alive." My stomach dropped so hard it felt like it'd fallen through the floor. 3 months before the funeral. If I'd been paying attention, maybe I would have noticed how early the cracks started. It began in November, right around the time Ethan started acting different. He'd come home from school quiet, retreat to his room, and say he was tired. Sometimes I'd hear him on the phone late at night, whispering angrily or sounding frustrated. Whenever I knocked, he'd hang up. I assumed it was normal teenage stuff. I assumed he'd talk to me when he was ready. But Claire noticed things first. One night she came over with her usual iced coffee and granola bar, settling onto my couch like she always did. "Hey," she said softly. "Is Ethan okay?" I shrugged, brushing it off. "He's 16. Everything annoys him." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, but this seems different. He looked upset at school today." "Really upset?" I frowned. "He didn't say anything to me." She hesitated, taking a deep breath like she was debating whether she should keep going. "Did something happen at home?" she asked. "Anything he might be scared to tell you?" My head snapped up. "What? No. Nothing like that." She nodded slowly, but she didn't look convinced. And that unsettled me. Looking back now, I realize her question wasn't random. She was probing, testing the waters, trying to see what I knew. At the time, I didn't understand why. The first red flag, the ride home. 2 weeks later, she picked Ethan up from school for me, because I had an urgent work call. When they got home, Ethan didn't even say hi to me, just stormed upstairs. Claire lingered in the doorway, looking unsure. "Everything go okay?" I asked. She forced a smile. "Yeah, he's just tired." But something about her tone bothered me. Something about her eyes. That night, I walked past Ethan's room and heard him whispering, not angry, not frustrated, scared. "No, I don't want to. Please stop." I froze, my heart pounding. I knocked, hard. The whispering stopped instantly. Ethan opened the door a few inches, his face pale. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "Nobody. Just a video." "A video doesn't talk back." He swallowed. "Mom, I'm fine. Please, just let it go." It wasn't like him to shut me out so sharply. It wasn't like him to look that frightened. But I let it go. I shouldn't have. The second red flag. The missing money. 2 weeks later, I noticed $120 missing from the kitchen drawer where I kept emergency cash. Not a huge amount. But Ethan knew not to touch it without asking. When I confronted him, he got defensive. "I didn't take it," he snapped. "Ethan," it didn't walk away. His eyes filled with tears, real ones, but instead of explaining, he just yelled, "You never believe me. Just forget it." Then he slammed the door. It was the first time he'd ever raised his voice at me. That night, Claire texted asking if I needed anything from the store. I told her Ethan and I had fought. She replied immediately, "Want me to talk to him?" I stared at that message for a long time. Why would she think she should talk to him? Why would she assume she had that kind of role? I typed no, it's fine. But I deleted it, then retyped it, then deleted it again. Something in my gut felt off, but I ignored it. The third red flag. The teacher's concern. Around mid-December, Miss Bradley emailed me, asking if we could meet after school. When I walked into her classroom, she looked exhausted. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "I'm worried about Ethan." My chest tightened. "What's going on?" She hesitated. "It's not just his grades slipping. Has been distracted, sometimes upset, and lately he's been asking odd questions." "What kind of questions?" She lowered her voice. "About trust. About people pretending to care. About whether adults sometimes use students to feel needed." I frowned deeply. "What? Why would he ask something like that?" She shook her head. "I'm not sure. But he seems scared to talk. I promised I'd check in with him, but I never asked him about the exact questions. I didn't want to push too hard. I told myself I'd do it when he seemed calmer. I told myself he had time. And then I lost him. The night before he died. This part never stops replaying. He came into my room with his hair messy and his hoodie half-zipped, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't get the words out. "Mom," he whispered, "if someone told you something big, would you believe them?" I sat up instantly. "Of course I would." He nodded slowly, but instead of opening up, he looked at the floor. "Never mind," he whispered. "It's stupid. Ethan, it's fine, Mom. Really." I didn't push. I didn't want him to feel pressured. But now I hear those words differently, like he was trying to warn me, trying to reach out, trying to tell me something about Claire, and I missed it. Back in the counseling room, the truth starts breaking through. Claire wiped her cheeks and took a shaky breath. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "I swear I didn't." "Then tell me," I said, gripping the back of a chair. "Tell me everything. From the start." But before she could speak, Caleb cut in. "She won't tell you unless you push her," he said. "Because she knows once she says it out loud, there's no going back." "Caleb, stop," Claire said sharply, voice cracking. "No," he replied coldly. "You owe her the truth." Claire looked at me with panic swelling in her eyes. "Melissa, please know I never wanted to hurt Ethan. I thought I was helping. I thought—" "You thought what?" I whispered. She broke. Her whole body shook. "I thought he needed me." My heart froze. Needed her? For what? Why? I stepped closer. "Claire, what did you do?" Her answer didn't come right away. But the fear in her eyes told me everything. Whatever she had to say, whatever secret she'd been hiding, it was big. It was dark. And it was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about the person I trusted most. Claire lowered her head into her hands, shoulders trembling. Not the quiet, composed kind of crying, but the raw, shaking kind that comes from guilt finally cracking open. I stood there frozen, not moving, not breathing, waiting for a truth I already sensed was going to tear through the last pieces of me that were still holding on. "Claire," I said softly, "just tell me what you did." She looked up, eyes bloodshot, and then she whispered the sentence that split my entire world. "I wasn't just helping Ethan. I was controlling him." The room tilted. I gripped the chair to stay upright. "What does that even mean?" I breathed. Caleb stepped forward, voice low and sharp, like he'd been waiting for this moment. She treated him like he belonged to her. "That's not true," Claire burst out. She turned to me, panic rising fast. "Melissa, I swear I never crossed a line like that. I got too attached." "Attached?" I repeated slowly. My voice felt foreign in my own throat. "Attached to my son. He came to me for advice," she cried. "He trusted me. And I let that go too far. I started thinking he needed me more than he actually did." Caleb scoffed. "You obsessed. Tell her." "Stop," she snapped at him. But then she looked at me again, and her expression collapsed. I started inserting myself into his decisions, his friendships, his schedule, his moods. I thought I was protecting him from stress, from pressure, from you. Everything inside me stilled. From me? Claire nodded weakly. You were overwhelmed, Mel. You were working non-stop. You said that yourself. And Ethan would vent to me sometimes. Little things, like arguing over homework or curfew. I thought you were being too strict. I thought he needed space. So I stepped in. My jaw clenched. Stepped in how? She took a long, shaky breath. I started telling him not to bother you with problems. I told him you were exhausted, that he should talk to me instead. I told him I understood him better. The words hit me like a punch straight to the chest. You undermined me, I whispered. You made him think I wasn't there for him. I didn't mean to, she sobbed. I genuinely thought I was helping. Caleb folded his arms. Tell her the rest. Claire's breathing turned shallow. Her hands twisted together until her knuckles went white. I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on him, she said. How guilty he felt trying to keep both of us happy. He was trying to balance everything, trying not to disappoint you, or me. My eyes burned, my throat tightened, but I stayed still, forcing the words out. What happened that night, Claire? Her face drained of color. Claire's version of the night. He came to my house around 7, she said quietly. He wasn't planning to stay long, just drop off one of the books ID lent him, but he looked troubled, more than usual. A memory flashed. Ethan lingering at my doorway the night before he died, wanting to say something and swallowing it instead. What was he troubled about? I asked. Claire hesitated. Then, me. I felt my ribcage tighten like it was shrinking. He told me he felt torn, she said. He said he didn't like keeping secrets from you. He said he felt like he was stuck in the middle. The guilt in her voice grew heavier, thicker, suffocating. And instead of backing off, instead of telling him to talk to you, I panicked. I told him I needed him. That he was one of the only people who understood me. My eyes snapped toward her. What? Claire, he was a kid. I know, she whispered. I know. And the second I said it, I regretted it. He got upset. He didn't yell, he didn't get angry, he just looked terrified. Terrified of what? Of choosing, she said. Of hurting either of us. He said he felt like he was letting someone down no matter what he did. My heart cracked. A physical pain shot across my chest. And then he left, Claire whispered. I didn't stop him. I didn't walk him home. I just sat there and cried because I realized what I'd done. She paused, shoulders shaking as she wiped her face with trembling hands, and before I could go after him, his call came in. My breath caught. He tried to call you? I asked. Claire nodded, tears spilling again. Yes, but I was too much of a coward to pick up. I didn't want to hear him say he didn't trust me anymore. I didn't want to hear him choose you. My hands began to shake. You ignored his call? I asked, voice thin as paper. She nodded slowly, painfully. One missed call, she whispered. I saw it. I froze, and then he was gone. My world splintering. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't form a single word. I felt everything and nothing at the same time. My son, my sweet, overthinking, gentle-hearted son, reached out to the wrong person, and she didn't pick up. Caleb's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. She let him walk out emotionally broken, and she ignored his call. That's the truth. Claire shook her head violently. Don't twist it. I wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't mean harm. I stepped back from both of them. My knees felt weak. My hands tingled. My vision blurred at the edges. Melissa, Claire pleaded, reaching toward me. You have to believe me, I never wanted to hurt him. I loved him. I loved him like... Stop. My voice cracked through the room with a force that startled even me. You don't get to say that, I said, tears finally spilling down my face. You don't get to tell me how you loved him while admitting you manipulated him, while admitting you made him keep things from me, while admitting you ignored his call when he needed someone. Mel. No, I said sharply. You broke his trust. You broke mine. And you still came into my house. You hugged me after the funeral. You stood in my kitchen. You looked me in the eyes for 2 whole days and never said a word. Her whole body caved inward. I wanted to tell you, she whispered. I tried 100 times. But I was afraid. I didn't want you to hate me. Well, I said, voice shaking but steady, you got your wish. She flinched like I'd slapped her, the breaking point. I turned toward the door, needing to get out of that room before I collapsed. But Caleb blocked my path. Move, I said. He didn't move. Now you see, he said quietly, why I came back, why I stayed away all those years, why I warned you she wasn't as perfect as you thought. My eyes snapped to his. You didn't come back for me, I said. You didn't come back for Ethan. You came back because you smelled weakness, because you saw an opening, because you always do. He smirked a cold, familiar smirk that made my skin crawl, but I pushed past him anyway, my hand trembling on the doorknob. Behind me, Claire whispered one final sentence. Melissa, please let me make this right. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer, because nothing in the world could unhear what Shed confessed. Nothing could take back the moment she let my son walk out that door hurting and alone. Nothing could undo the betrayal that was now carved into my bones. When I stepped into the hallway, my legs almost buckled. The grief was different now, no longer soft, no longer foggy. It was sharp, it was jagged, and it was aimed at the 2 people I once trusted most. This was the moment my world broke clean in half, and I had no idea the truth was about to fracture even further. I stood there in that dark classroom, my hands still shaking from the moment I saw him. Mason, the man who'd been secretly pulling my husband away from me long before the funeral, and long before I had a chance to understand what was happening. But as I walked out into the hallway, the cold air hit my face, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't clarity, it wasn't courage, it was exhaustion. A kind of exhaustion that forces you to stop running, stop blaming, and just stand still long enough to finally see what's been in front of you the whole time. I leaned back against the lockers, staring up at the ceiling lights humming overhead. Why did he come here? Why today? Why now? I whispered to myself. I had no answers, but I did know this. Something didn't add up. Not about the timing, not about the secrecy, not about the fear I saw in Mason's eyes the moment I stepped in. He hadn't looked triumphant. He hadn't looked smug. Had looked trapped. And that was the first crack in the story I'd been telling myself. When I got back to my car, I sat behind the wheel and forced myself to breathe. In, out, slow, steady. My mind kept replaying Mason's face, pale, nervous, sweating. If Had been my husband's secret partner, why hide? Why act terrified? Why look like someone had cornered him? There was something more here. Something deeper. And it was buried under layers I hadn't even begun to peel back. My phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from earlier. From Ethan's teacher, the one who'd called me after the funeral. My heart jumped. I'd been too overwhelmed, too angry, too numb to listen before, but now, with the silence pressing in around me, I hit play. A soft, cautious voice filled the car. Hi, Mrs. Taylor, this is Miss Moreno. I'm so sorry about your husband, but I really need to speak with you. It's important. It's about something your son told me last week. Something that didn't make sense at the time, but now I think you should hear it. Please call me back when you can. I froze. Last week? Before the funeral? Before I even knew anything was wrong? Ethan had said something strange enough that a teacher felt compelled to reach out. A whisper of panic rose up in me. What did he say? What did he know? What had he seen? I restarted the engine, hands trembling, but my mind was suddenly sharper than it had been in weeks. This wasn't just grief. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a trail one Mason didn't want me following, and one my husband had taken to his grave. A trail that might explain why Had been distant, why Had been stressed, why he died so suddenly. I shifted the car into drive, And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't following pain. I was following facts. Miss Moreno lived 20 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood lined with old oaks and worn brick houses, the kind of place that felt comforting even when life wasn't. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been watching the window. Her eyes were soft, but her expression was tight with worry. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "You look exhausted." "I don't have the energy to lie," I answered. "I need to know what my son told you." She stepped aside and let me in. Her house was warm, filled with mementos and the faint smell of cinnamon tea. We sat at her kitchen table, and she folded her hands, gathering herself before she began. "Last week," she said, "Ethan stayed after class. He looked scared. He kept asking if adults could go to jail for lying." My stomach dropped. She continued, "I asked if something happened at home, and he said no. But my dad and that man he talks to, they're hiding something." My breath caught. "That man?" I whispered. "Did he say who?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He pointed at a picture on my desk, a picture from the staff meeting last month, and he said, "That's him. That's the man who makes Dad cry when he thinks I'm asleep." My heart cracked. The man in the picture wasn't Mason. It was someone else. Someone who'd never once crossed my mind. Someone with power, real power over my husband's job, his future, his fear. Miss Moreno slid the photo toward me. "I didn't think anything of it," she said softly. "But when the school called to say you had a family loss, something in my gut told me this mattered." My fingers hovered over the photo. A face stared back at me, calm, polished, confident. My husband's boss. The district superintendent. I felt the world tilt. It wasn't about an affair. It wasn't about betrayal the way it imagined. It wasn't even about Mason. He wasn't the threat. My husband had been caught in something darker, something he hid to protect us, something he was terrified of. I closed my eyes. And that was the moment the grief shifted, the moment the ground under my feet changed shape. I wasn't a mourning widow anymore. I wasn't a woman shattered by imagined betrayal. I was a woman standing at the edge of a truth that could destroy everything or finally explain it all. I opened my eyes, steady and cold. "Thank you," I whispered to Miss Moreno. I think I know where to look now." And with that, the turning point settled in my bones. The story I thought I knew wasn't the story at all, and the real one, the one my husband died with, was just beginning to unravel. I drove home with the photo still trembling in my hand, the superintendent's smile frozen in a way that suddenly felt sinister. The night air outside was cold, but the chill crawling up my spine came from something far deeper. My husband hadn't been hiding a lover. Had been hiding fear. And fear this big didn't come from someone like Mason. It came from someone with power, someone like the man in that photo. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was flickering, casting long shadows across the front yard. I stepped inside and found Ethan asleep on the couch, the TV still on low. I brushed his hair back gently. "What did you see, baby?" I whispered. "What were you trying to tell us?" But he didn't stir, just breathed softly, innocent in ways I no longer felt. I tucked a blanket around him and slipped upstairs to my husband's office, the room I hadn't dared step into since the funeral. The doorknob felt colder than it should. When I turned on the light, dust motes floated in the stillness, like secrets frozen in the air. His desk was as he'd left it, stacks of papers, lesson plans, one half-finished mug of coffee. But then, a folder caught my eye. It wasn't like the others. It was thick, bulging with documents, and the tab was labeled in my husband's neat handwriting, "Copies just in case." My pulse kicked hard. I sat down and opened it. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, and copied files, and the more I read, the more the room seemed to close in on me. There were receipts, schedules, a list of transferred students, notes taken in my husband's handwriting, frantic, confused, scared, and at the center of every document, the superintendent's name. I didn't understand at first. Why was my husband tracking meetings? Schedules? Why were there emails between the superintendent and several school board members with subject lines like adjustments, arrangements, external approvals? One email hit me like a punch. We can't move the kids without parental consent. Or his. Make sure he stays cooperative. Another. His asking too many questions. Handle it, my throat tightened. My husband had been a gentle man, too gentle. Not built for corruption, threats, or secrets buried in school district politics. He must have stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to see. Maybe he tried to report it. Maybe he pushed back. Maybe someone pushed harder. As I kept reading, a name appeared over and over, not mine, not my husband's, but a child's. A boy named Noah Grayson, transferred suddenly, moved between schools, pulled from class by the superintendent multiple times. And my husband had handwritten a note under one of the transfer forms. Why is a 9-year-old meeting privately with him? My blood went cold. This wasn't about money, or adult affairs, or jealousy or betrayal. This was about kids. About something happening behind school doors, something my husband had tried to expose. Something someone higher up wanted buried. I grabbed my mouth with my hand, stifling a gasp. The realization tore through me. My husband hadn't been distant because he was cheating, had been distant because he was terrified, because he was trying to protect our son and everyone else's, had been carrying all of this alone. And 2 hours after his funeral, the one person who knew the truth, the only person he confided in, wasn't Mason. It was the teacher who called me. I sat there staring at the papers when a sound creaked behind me. Footsteps. I jolted up. Mom? It was Ethan, standing in the doorway rubbing his eyes. You okay? He asked softly. I wiped my face quickly. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm okay. He looked past me at the scattered papers. That's Dad's folder, he said quietly. He told me not to touch it. My breath froze. You knew about this? I whispered. Ethan nodded slowly, sliding into the room. He said, if something ever happened to him, I had to tell you to look in his desk, but I didn't know when to say it. You were so sad. I didn't want to make you hurt more. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight, tears burning my eyes. You didn't do anything wrong, I whispered into his hair. You were so brave. He hugged me back, small, warm, trusting. Then he said something that shattered the last piece of the old story I'd been clinging to. Mom, that man who keeps coming to my school? The one who always wants to talk to me alone? That's him. He pointed at the superintendent's face on the printed email. My whole body went still. He tries to act nice, Ethan added. But he scares me. I never told Dad, because I didn't want him to get in trouble. But Dad, he found out anyway. The room spun. Everything made sense now. My husband hadn't cheated. He hadn't betrayed me. He hadn't abandoned his family emotionally. Had been fighting for us, for Ethan, for truth, all alone. And whoever the superintendent was, whoever he really was beneath that polished smile, he wasn't someone grieving my husband's death. He was someone trying to control the one loose thread left behind. My son. The final, devastating realization slammed into me. The superintendent didn't want me. He wanted Ethan, and my husband had died trying to stop him. The plot twist wasn't that I'd been betrayed by love, it was that I'd been blindsided by the truth, and the real enemy had been hiding in plain sight. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. I stayed at the kitchen table long after Ethan had gone back to bed, the folder of my husband's documents spread out like pieces of a truth he died trying to protect. Every page sharpened something inside me. Every note he scribbled in the margins strengthened my spine. For the first time since the funeral, I felt steady. Not healed, not whole, but steady enough to finally stand where my husband once stood against a man who had power, access, and a mask so polished it fooled an entire school district. But it wasn't going to fool me anymore. By sunrise, I had a plan. A mother's plan. A widow's plan. A plan my husband never had the chance to finish. I placed every document into a clean binder, in order, labeled and clear, not frantic like when had written them. I walked into my bedroom, changed into clean clothes, tied my hair back, and looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the woman who'd walked into that classroom the night before. I looked like someone who finally had a direction, someone who understood what had to be done, someone who wouldn't run not anymore. The first step was simple. I called Miss Moreno. When she answered, her voice was groggy, but when she heard the calm in my tone, she straightened immediately. "I need your help," I told her. "I'm here," she replied without hesitation. She met me at a small cafe halfway between our houses. The sun was just rising, brushing the sky with soft colors that felt too gentle for what we were about to do. But maybe that contrast was exactly what I needed, a reminder that life still had light in it, even when we were walking through shadow. I slid the binder across the table. She opened it, page by page, her eyes widening, jaw tightening, expression shifting from confusion to anger to a fierce, protective resolve. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He tried to stop this. He really tried." "Yes," I said softly, "and I'm not letting his work die with him." She closed the binder slowly, her hands firm. "What do you need from me?" "Someone who saw things. Someone the district trusts. Someone who can confirm that he wasn't imagining this." She nodded once, deliberate and strong. "I'll stand with you." For a moment, emotion swelled in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I needed strength more than tears. By noon, I had spoken to 2 other teachers my husband confided in, people I never even knew he worked closely with. They'd always thought something felt off about the superintendent's involvement with transfers and his private meetings. They weren't sure what it meant, but they were sure something wasn't right. Piece by piece, the ground under the superintendent's feet began to shift, not enough to topple him yet, but enough to make him wobble. Enough to make him feel pressure. Enough for the first crack of fate to turn. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across my living room, my phone buzzed. It was the superintendent's number. For a second, fear tried to climb back into my throat. But something unbelievable happened. It didn't make it there. Instead, a kind of steady heat filled me. I answered. "Hello?" I said, voice calm. "Mrs. Taylor," he replied smoothly. "I heard you visited the school last night. I was hoping we could schedule a meeting. There are transitions to discuss." Transitions, the same word in the emails. The word my husband circled twice. I felt my jaw tighten. "Actually," I said, "I'd prefer if we met at the district office, with other staff present. Transparency, you know." A tiny pause, just a fraction of a second, but enough to reveal the truth he didn't want me to know. He felt the shift too. He felt my power rising. "I see," he said lightly. "Yes, of course. I'll arrange it." We hung up. I let out a long breath, bracing my hands on the counter. Fate had been twisting me for weeks, bruising, bending, breaking me. But now it was turning. Not fast, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Because for the first time, he wasn't hunting me. I was coming for him. And he knew it. The reversal had begun. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. 3 days. 3 days for the superintendent to feel the walls closing in. 3 days for the truth my husband died protecting to crawl out into the light. And 3 days for karma, slow, deliberate, and patient, to begin its quiet work. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream. All I needed was the truth. And the truth was already doing the heavy lifting. By Wednesday morning, the district office buzzed with whispers. Someone, not me, had leaked the binder contents to the teachers' group chat. And teachers talk. They talk fast. They talk loudly. And more importantly, they talk to parents. Within hours, parents began asking questions. In classrooms, in hallways, at pickup lines. Questions the superintendent could no longer dodge with his polished smile. One teacher later told me she watched him walk through the main hallway with that same mask he always wore, confident, calm, superior, but his hands kept twitching at his collar, pulling like the air had gotten too tight. People notice when a predator gets nervous. They feel the shift. The shine starts to look like sweat. Thursday morning, I got a call from the school board's assistant, a nervous young woman whose voice trembled as she spoke. "Mrs. Taylor, I'm not supposed to say anything, but the board wants to speak with you privately before Friday." They saw the documents. My pulse stayed steady. The new version of me didn't shake easily. "Of course," I said. "Tell me when." The meeting happened over Zoom. 7 board members, 7 faces that looked troubled, concerned, shaken. They asked for the truth. And I gave it every detail. Every page my husband photocopied, every question he died with, every fear he tried to shield our son from. When I finished, the room fell silent. One woman removed her glasses, rubbing her eyes. Another leaned forward, voice low. "We should have seen this earlier," she said. "We trusted him too much. We let him operate without oversight." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Karma was already in the room with us. Friday came. I walked into the district office with Ethan's teacher on one side and 2 other staff members on the other, people who had decided they weren't afraid anymore. Inside the conference room, the superintendent stood at the head of the table, perfectly dressed, perfectly groomed, but his eyes gave him away. Wide, frantic, cornered. He tried to speak first. "Mrs. Taylor, I'm deeply concerned by these." "No," I cut in gently. "You don't get to shape the story anymore." He stared at me, stunned. The board entered behind us. His face drained of color. "Let's begin," one member said firmly. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to accuse. The documents spoke for themselves. The timeline spoke. The emails spoke. The transfers spoke. My husband's notes, broken handwriting, shaken lines spoke louder than any of us. And when the superintendent tried to interrupt, to twist, to deflect, a board member slammed her folder shut. "Enough," she snapped. "We've heard enough." He fell silent. For the first time since my husband died, the room was finally safe from him. 2 hours later, the board escorted him out, not in handcuffs, but stripped of authority, stripped of control, stripped of the mask he hid behind for years. I didn't smile. Karma doesn't require celebration. As he walked past me, his eyes flicked up, searching for fear. I had none left to give him. Just calm. Just truth. Just the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had finally finished the chapter her husband never got to end. The door closed behind him, and that was it. Karma wasn't loud. It didn't explode. It simply arrived steady, inevitable, and it took everything he built on lies with it. The superintendent was gone, but what he left behind wasn't just a mess of paperwork and corrupted decisions. It was a trail of fear, silence, and kids who had been moved around like chess pieces while the adults who were supposed to protect them looked the other way. The board launched a district-wide audit within days. Parents demanded town halls. Teachers stepped forward to speak about things they'd noticed but never felt brave enough to question. For the first time since my husband's funeral, the story didn't belong to the man who tried to hide it. It belonged to the man who tried to expose it. And to the people who finally listened. But even with the superintendent removed, life didn't snap back into place. It took time, long, breath-catching time, for the world around me to feel steady again. In the weeks that followed, I kept waking up at 5 a.m., sitting at the table with a mug of coffee, staring at the sunrise coming through my kitchen window. The sky changed colors slowly, gently, like healing does. Some mornings I cried. Some mornings I just breathed. Most mornings, I talked to my husband in a whisper, not asking for signs, not begging for answers, just updating him. "Your folder worked," I'd say quietly. "I finally understand you. We're safe now." Ethan would wander in, rubbing his eyes, and I'd pull myself together before he sat with me. Kids sense things more deeply than we realize. He never asked me what happened to the superintendent. He never asked me for details. He just started walking a little taller, sleeping a little better, smiling a little more. A child knows when a storm has passed, even if he never speaks of it. The district hired an interim superintendent, a woman named Dr. Sloan, who spoke plainly and didn't sugarcoat anything. During her first week, she asked to meet with me privately. I expected formality, maybe a polite thank you for bringing this to our attention. What I didn't expect was the softness in her eyes when she said, "Your husband tried to blow the whistle months ago. He didn't have proof strong enough to stand alone. But he told the truth, and because you continued what he couldn't finish, we can finally fix this." I didn't realize I was gripping the arms of my chair until I forced myself to release them. "Thank you," I whispered. "But I didn't do it alone. Most people would have run," she said gently. "You didn't." And maybe that was the moment it truly hit me. I never wanted to be strong in this way. I never wanted to fight systems or expose corruption or dig through secrets my husband carried. But life doesn't ask what kind of strength we want. It teaches us the kind we need. 1 month after everything exploded, the school held a memorial for my husband. A real one. Not the quiet funeral with a pastor who barely knew him. Not the routine service where strangers said polite things. This time, it was his world, the school he loved, the children he helped, the coworkers who finally understood exactly how much he carried. They dedicated a small garden near the playground in his name, Mr. Taylor's Corner. A simple wooden sign. A bench. Flowers planted by the kids. When I walked into the courtyard, the sight of it hit me so hard I had to hold onto the rail. Dozens of children stood there wearing hand-drawn stickers on their shirts. Be brave, be kind, be like Mr. Taylor. I wasn't ready for that, not emotionally, not mentally, not in any version of myself. But I walked forward anyway, because grief doesn't wait for readiness, it asks only for honesty. One of his former students tugged on my sleeve. "Mrs. Taylor," she said, "your husband helped me learn to read. He stayed after school with me almost every day. He said everybody deserves someone who doesn't give up on them." Tears filled my eyes so fast I couldn't hold them back. "Yeah," I whispered. "That sounds like him." The principal asked if I wanted to say something. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I walked to the front, looked at all those faces, young, hopeful, trusting, and then looked at the bench with my husband's name on it. When he came home tired, I began softly. I used to think it was because he worked too hard, but now I know it was because he cared too deeply. My voice trembled, but I didn't hide it. He believed kids deserved safety and honesty. And he believed that doing the right thing shouldn't make you a target. I took a breath, and even though he isn't here to see it, his truth made a difference. Someone behind me sniffed. Someone else reached for a handkerchief. I continued. If there's one thing he would want you to remember, it's this: courage doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like asking a question when everyone else stays silent. Sometimes it looks like telling the truth even when it costs you something. My hands shook, but I kept going. And sometimes, courage looks like a teacher who refused to ignore a child who needed help. I paused. He gave everything he had to protect others, and the best way to honor him is to protect each other too. When I stepped back, people reached out, hands on my arm, quiet thank yous, soft nods, not pity, understanding, respect, human connection, the kind my husband always believed in. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I went back to the garden alone. The school was quiet. The sky was dark except for a few scattered stars. I sat on the bench with my husband's name carved into the wood. "I finished it," I whispered. "You don't have to worry anymore." A breeze passed through the leaves, warm and gentle, like a hand placed on my back. And for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel crushed by the weight of what he left behind. I felt carried by it, because his burden had become our truth, and our truth had become our strength. If life has taught me anything, it's this: silence protects the wrong people. Truth protects the right ones. You can lose someone you love. You can stand in the wreckage of everything you thought you knew. You can break in ways you never imagined. But when you decide to stand up, even with trembling hands, even with a shattered heart, life finds a way to rise with you. My husband didn't die in vain. His voice didn't disappear, and now, neither will mine. Because when you walk toward the truth, no matter how dark or painful, you don't walk alone. You walk with everyone who was ever hurt by silence, and you walk with everyone who will be saved because you finally spoke. That is the real ending, and the real beginning.